leaders. So this is something that I feel like is worthy of a little bit of time. The first article I looked at was by Brigham and Bacon, and they discussed the assessment of gifted and talented students. Their assertion is that the assessment of gifted and talented learners varies greatly because they are not entitled to special education, unlike learners with disabilities who are protected under IDEA. So they made the point that while gifted learners are entitled a separate education and they require a different style of teaching, perhaps they're not actually protected under the same law as other special education learners. They pointed out some leadership considerations that should be made would be financial reasoning. So using assessment results to support expenditures was a big deal. Also, being able to adequately define a group that is receiving these appropriate services is an important consideration, as well as assigning teachers who are able to meet the group's unique learning needs. They discussed how assessments can actually serve many purposes. So, for instance, it can indicate a learner's eligibility, perhaps program development, and continue on with adequate progress monitoring. And they also pointed out that gifted education should confer access to some element of the educational system that is a benefit to the students who receive it, and also would not benefit other students in the same extent if they received it. So the assessment of eligibility for gifted education is definitely an important issue to consider as educational leaders. So I looked at some indicators and measures of giftedness. So through the article, they discussed Sternberg's 5 dimensions of gifted learners. One thing they suggested to look for based upon his 5 dimensions would be excellence in any particular field, rarity. So for example, if early on, you're impressed that maybe a pre-K student is able to draw a tree. Well, did they have a class lesson on how to draw a tree? And if so, then what is special about it? What's rare? So would that student who you're looking at for rarity like actually include special elements of the tree or more details of the tree than the other students? So those types of rare performances is something to look for. Productivity, like the high rate of productivity is something to look at. Being able to demonstrate certain qualities and the value of work. Some early markers of excellence would be the willingness to work, not having to beg that students to work. Competitiveness, especially with oneself, like always trying to get better at a particular skill, was something they said would be an early indicator. And rapid learning rates. So if that child is having more success above their peers, and you're having to keep that child busy, that's something that would definitely just something we can notice in the classroom even from early on. One thing that they suggested to be used for as a measure of rarity would be the IQ test or standardized test. They suggested that portfolios are a good way to demonstrate growth, especially for areas of minorities, which is the topic I'm specifically looking at tonight. Being able to carry out plans, using observations, rating scales, or other checklists in the classroom could be, early ways of measuring giftedness and being able to refer a student for receiving some gifted education. These are some measures of creative giftedness, which I'm not really familiar with. I don't think that's something that we tackle often in public schools. So there were 4 of these that Rowan Bacon suggested, and they also pointed that students that you feel might have more musical inclinations are actually better measured with IQ tests. Some common programs that have been used in K-12 are accelerated pacing. That's one of the classes that I'm actually teaching now. It's just we learn at a more rapid rate in that class. Level classes based upon data. So some schools just are like, okay, it's high, medium, low class. Advanced placement, of course, you guys, I'm sure, heard of many of these self-contained gifted classes, magnet schools, some classes that actually you pull them out and do level work at a more advanced level, or even the dual enrollment opportunities that are offered like in high school. These are common programs. So we went to a second article that I looked at by Donna Ford. Her article is titled Underrepresentation of African American and Hispanic Students in Gifted Education, the Impact of Social Inequality, Elitism, and Colorblindness. So inequality is certainly her passion. She refers to some of her previous works in this article, and you can tell this is something that she speaks out for. But she made 3 assertions that I noticed. She asserted that the current underrepresentation of African American and Hispanics in gifted education is immoral and potentially illegal. That is the first assertion that really caught my attention, because there are laws that we could possibly be breaking because we are not ensuring that minorities are being represented in gifted education. The second assertion was cultural differences are negatively viewed by educators. So educators are viewing, certain interactions with students negatively, and therefore have a negative experience with certain students. And it's just kind of like a spiral effect. So that particular educator or teacher is not actually looking for these early indicators of giftedness within that student. The third assertion she made was African American and Hispanic underrepresentation is resulting in achievement gaps. And I found that particularly interesting with what we're going through now and our huge concern with our e-learning programs and how it's potentially creating a larger learning gap. One thing that I'm actually noticing is my students who I would like to be spending the most time with now to make sure they're prepared for the next grade level are the ones who actually are not working at home, where I'm having to coach to work and I'm having to make those connections at home. And so that I found that part very interesting right now. Really, it's what we're experiencing as educators at the moment. So what she did was she did a study, and she used the relative difference in composition index and an equity index in accompaniment with trends from 1998 through 2006. And she determined 2 things. Firstly, that African Americans are most underrepresented by 46.6%. I found that pretty high. That's almost half. Hispanics are secondly underrepresented by 37.3%. So they're not actually far behind African Americans in being underrepresented in gifted education. She states that gifted education has consistently failed to heed demographic forecasts as the storming damage upon us in its form of stubborn and pervasive achievement gaps, which are fueled by underrepresentation. She just goes on to explain how we're not only doing service to these minority students, but we are actually breaking the law by not ensuring they are represented in our gifted education programs. So that leads me to my next big question is, what can school leaders do to address this underrepresentation issue? Which brings me to my third article titled Effective Local Norms on Racial and Ethnic Representation in Gifted Education. So there's a group of 5 who came together from various universities, and they actually did a study about norms on racial education. So the study of effects of gifted norms in our educational system is by Peters, Rambo, Hernandez, and all. They used the NWEA MAP testing, which some of you may be familiar with. I know we use it in certain grades in my district. It's a computer adaptive test that measures kindergarten through 11th grade skills. And this test was very appropriate because they specifically looked at third graders, which is a level that oftentimes educational leaders start observing for giftedness. I also find that interesting because they're in school for almost 4 years before that happens. But that's kind of a sidebar. So for third graders to be able to possibly be tested on an 11th grade level, you know, should they have that capacity, I felt like that was pretty neat that they used this test. They actually tracked it from 2007 to 2017, so of course it's 10 years. They looked at third grade across 10 states in 3,525 districts, 9,700 schools, and 43 million plus students. So they found a variance of norms on representation in gifted education. The national norms, if you use national norms and national standardized test results, they actually found that it's misidentifying student populations because students are being compared to their national peers rather than local peers. They're using national percentiles rather than local percentiles. And that misses part of the definition of gifted education, and they actually used the 1993 definition. So they suggested that using local norms, perhaps setting building or district norms rather than national state, are more consistent identifying results. They did favor just setting the building norms over the district norms, but found a closer correlation, even if you just set a district norm for identifying a gifted population using standardized tests. So that's something that we as educational leaders moving here on out, we can actually consider using building norms to identify districts' gifted populations. So they recommended to identify maybe the top 5%, 15%, depending on your district or school's resources, as well as the population. They also recommended avoid removing services for any students who previously identified as gifted. So although that student might not particularly identify as gifted any longer, they encourage that you continue to allow them to be part of the program to avoid, you know, causing any sort of community issues within your school. So the irrefutable laws that I found at play here was the law of influence. Others must see the value in operating gifted services in a potentially different manner. So as educational leaders, we would have to be able to influence others to get on board with this. I think using, you know, some of the research found in these articles would be a way to. So the law process that you have to understand change will not happen in a day. You can remove services for already identified students was part of that. Law of empowerment, empowering staff and learners, you know, to have those opportunities. So, you know, pulling, you know, some of your teachers who you feel are successful with gifted learners as part of empowering them to have those sorts of opportunities, as well as giving those learners, those minorities, the empowerment to learn at the advanced level that they could possibly be capable of. The law of navigation is important here because leadership must chart the course for updated testing or teaching methods. There's definitely a law of buy-in. Using leadership to encourage buy-in is a huge deal because if you've already already had a certain way of doing things. You know, you have to encourage people that this would be a positive thing for your district. You know, you would make sure that you're representing the minorities in the gifted education program. Law of legacy, leadership choices that allow living a legacy and passing the baton to leave a positive impact. I think that any leader who tries to, you know, ensure that there's correct representation, we're not looking at individual students and perhaps their cultural differences, is something that would be part of one's leadership legacy. So here are my references. And thank you for your time tonight.
Dr. Farrell, I think you're still muted.
I see, I'm muted. Yeah, because everything went blank on me all of a sudden. I lost everything. And is Christy still here? I think we lost Christy. There she is. Christy's back. I think we lost you, Christy, or something happened.
Yeah, my speaker went out, so I don't know how long it was out. Hopefully I got through it all.
Oh, you got through pretty much all of it, I think.
Okay.
Your sound was not working well, but we could hear it.
All right.
So thank you very much. Yeah, gifted education is rough because the reality is it should be covered under special education law. IDEA should be covering it. I was able to get my son, this is decades ago, covered as under gifted under special ed because we were able to determine his giftedness was actually making him an at-risk student because he was so bored with the classroom and they couldn't deal with it. So the school district was able to get funding to assist and got him an IEP because he was considered at risk of dropping out of school. So there are some things we can do with at-risk kids. Anybody else have any experience with them to share? That was an interesting study that you cited on that. There are a lot of good statistics there. And it was a big study that many students involved, excuse me. It's a very thorough study. Okay, let's see. Adam, you're still here, right?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, Adam. Are you ready to do yours?
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up now. My laptop is not the quickest. So.
Okay, you know how to share a screen on this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Just give me a second and I'll hopefully get it up for
Oh,
you
when your
guys.
screen comes up, we'll get going. Just to let everybody know, they sent out a wrong email on when grades are due. We were originally told grades are due next Tuesday. The grades are due next Thursday by noon. So by then I will have your your papers back, all your grades will be posted. I'm anticipating that I'll be finished by Tuesday to have everything in, barring any technological glitches like the system going down or Blackboard going down. We're in the last few weeks of Blackboard to be used for teaching, and then on June the 30th, Blackboard goes away 100% because that's when the license is up. Okay, Adam, if you
Yeah,
open
I
up,
think I'm ready to go. Yeah.
oh, go ahead then, bring it up because it'll override me.
Okay. Slides up.
Okay, all you gotta do is go to your slideshow and get rolling. I'm gonna turn my mic off.
Okay. So I did my oral presentation on leadership and the leadership development in collegiate athletics. Obviously, I am part of the McKendree men's soccer coaching staff, so I wanted to focus my presentation on the coaching aspect of things instead of the classroom, which obviously may be a little bit different to most of you guys in this class. So I'll start with the first slide. Obviously, it's about learning to lead and leadership qualities in collegiate athletics. So my article is based from the website Championship Coaches Network, which is basically a network for all coaches. Great information on there about all different things. So I found this article quite interesting. So it was a recent survey done across NCAA Division 1 through 44 schools. And the survey was to find out what colleges were doing about leadership development with their student athletes. And obviously leadership is a huge part of athletics and education, but are we doing enough to make it possible for the student athletes to get enough information about it to develop and obviously carry it on through their collegiate career as well? So is enough being provided to the student athletes? So moving on, there is an issue. The leadership training and development is not as frequent as people may imagine. But it's quite interesting to see that 100% from the survey believe that learning leadership skills is an important part of a student's development, and 93% believe that student athletes impact the department's academic success as well. So there's obviously a big importance surrounding athletics, but is it being fulfilled? And then moving over to the right-hand side of the screen, the dissatisfaction of training provided. 12% are satisfied with the amount of leadership training that they're receiving. So obviously it's quite low compared to how many believe that it's of importance. So moving on, the challenges that we're facing. So I wanted to go into this a little bit. The survey is very detailed, to say the least, about numbers and stuff of what came through. So the effectiveness was obviously put into place, and the only 33% were satisfied with the effectiveness of their leadership training that they do at their own school. So obviously it's not that great of a percentage. And then on the left hand side is who is targeted during these leadership development programs and training, and only 48% receive 48% receive no leadership training at all. So the captains of the teams are not getting any extra information. So obviously it's nearly about half. 43% receive 1 to 5 hours of leadership training. So it's a 50-50 split between information being received and information not being received. So these are the topics that mainly get covered in leadership programs. And as you can see, there's a number of different topics, but the top three are the primary ones that get most use. So obviously team building, communication, and leading by example, the three top ones, high percentages, and that's mainly the base of what's being covered in these programs. And the rest kind of filters down, and you can see that there's a lot of different areas that need to be covered, and that is not being covered. So this is the problem as well. The schools that are getting this information out there are only covering certain amounts. So obviously, is that enough? So that's the question that we're asking right now. Measuring effectiveness. This is a big thing. So many offer little follow-up. It's okay to do a training workshop or a development day, but what is being offered after that to see if the information is being taken on? So as you can see from the left-hand side of the slide, 60% offer no follow-up after the initial leadership training workshop, and then only 16% of colleges create personalized leadership development programs for their student athletes. So this could, obviously, the leadership development programs need to be specified to, it could be age, gender, sports. There's lots of different variables that could go into this. So they're kind of just giving it out to everyone as a broad sort of information. And is that really beneficial to certain athletes in different sports? That could obviously be the question. So it's quite broad, and it's just given to everyone kind of thing. So looking on over to measuring effectiveness, 30% of the survey do not evaluate the effectiveness of their leadership programming. That's quite a high number. I guess they just put the information out there, like I said before, and there's no real follow-up. There's no real follow-up from higher up to see if it is actually implemented or if it is actually working. So it's okay giving information out, but is that information being picked up, and is there a process where you can clearly see improvements as you go further along down the line? So the current state, kind of a quick sort of summary of it all really, is that the percentages show that as you go further on, it gets diluted. So the information is quite brief. And is that enough really for our student athletes? As you can see from the slide, expecting captains and leaders to do their job effectively with little or no training is being quite negligent and short-sighted, I think. And this goes back to the lower priority in John Maxwell's book that we all have. I think that this relates to it quite well. The quote from John Maxwell on the screen says that if you help develop the top 20%, they can in turn shape the employees below them and create a cycle of leadership. Obviously, John Maxwell's talking about a business and a company, but I wanted to, you can easily translate this into college sports or even in the classroom. That 20% is, the student leaders, the captains of the teams. And if you focus information and leadership qualities into that group, then obviously, as John Maxwell states, it does filter down into the rest of the people, and then it brings them up. So I do think this relates quite well. And then just sort of finish off with a final review of the state of leadership development in athletics, is that much more needs to be done still to identify, cultivate, and develop student athlete leaders. as I said, it's an integral part of athletics and sports in general. And you can easily take the leadership roles in sports into the classroom, into careers and stuff like that. So I think it is very valuable, and we do not do enough for our student athletes at the moment to provide them with the tools to succeed. And I have a little quote here, which was from the Coaches Network website, which I found quite good. Is that, imagine if you were given a brand new software to use, but with no manual or tutorial, and it kind of comes back to that, is that we expect our student athletes to do the job or learn on the job, which is great, of course, but if we gave them the tools as well, then I think that their progress will be much quicker, and they will be able to reach more success in a faster rate. So I thought that quote was pretty good. So yeah, obviously quite a shorter presentation than most of you guys, but I wanted it to be, I wanted to get the information out there and try not to ramble on too much. So yeah, it's a great website. It's really helpful for coaches like myself to try and connect and learn more about leadership roles and certain things that are bigger than just soccer, for my case. So it was very interesting. And going back to the survey, obviously it was the highest level of collegiate athletics, the NCAA Division 1. So these are the top schools with a lot more facilities, a lot more funding and infrastructure than, say, McKendree. So I feel that if it's not being treated at the top, then it definitely isn't being looked at further down the ladder at the NAIA level or the Division 2 and 3 level. So that's something to think about as well. But yeah, that's all from me, really.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Adam. I'm going to start my video and turn off your sharing.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
It was interesting because how many of you, my gut feeling is that all of you can do this by a hand raise, go through workshops at the beginning of each school year for teachers on some teaching methodology or something like that. How many of you have gone through those?
Yeah, I've been through a good amount.
Yeah, I'm seeing a few hands go up. Quite a few of you go through those. Yeah. Is there ever very much follow-up on them? They kind of do this one-shot workshop, and you're kind of expected to take what you've learned in 1 day or 2 days and go out and use it.
Yep.
That's usually the model, right?
Yep.
And when you're doing that kind of a model, how can you expect any real development? As a principal, if you're going to do workshops at the beginning of a school year to get your teachers into a teaching methodology or a change process. We were talking about the change process last week. To get that change through takes talking and following. It's a process. It doesn't happen with an event. So having a single workshop is not going to make anything happen. This is the same thing with this type of leadership. When you're developing leadership with student athletes or schools, it doesn't matter. And if there's no follow-up, it's not going to go anywhere. And you mentioned, Adam, that this was for business model. Doesn't matter whether it's business, schools, colleges, and business. If without follow-up on change and training, you're not going to develop your leaders. You've got to they have to know, they have to be followed up. You have to do what's necessary to keep them going. I also noticed that one of the top things that are taught in your coaching was listening. And that's a good segue into the next segment of tonight's class. Anybody have anything that you want to bring up or discuss about this? Okay, I'm not seeing any microphones come on, so I guess not. All right, well then here we go. I'm going to bring up a slide on listening. And it's actually not just listening. We're not going to do the exercise because you're not in the same room. It's not going to be the same sitting at home in front of your computer shouting next. You know, you're not. It's not going to happen. So we're going to do just part of this on listening, and then I'm going to talk about servant leadership in depth, and we'll be out of here for tonight for this class. And I'll be asking for questions for the good of the order if you have any. Normally on this night, I would be taking you out for a drink. We can't do that, unfortunately. So let's look at my slides here. Confrontational leadership, listening. This is a the slide presentation I have. I'm not going to do the whole presentation because part of it is an activity where we have to sit and talk to each other and do it in close proximity and shout and make noise and whatever. But this is excerpted from Ben Bissell's book. And it was a book called Handling Conflict with Difficult Faculty. It was Tools for Maintaining Your Sanity and Your Dignity. I've attended 2 workshops by Ben Bissell. So I have not only the readings from his book, I have the actual experience of working with him on this. But he talks about conflict styles, and you have to know conflict styles because confrontational listening occurs and is a way to avoid conflict as a leader. Believe me, as educational leaders, when you get out in the school and you're a principal or an assistant principal, department chair, or whatever, you are going to have conflict with individuals. There are 6 styles of conflict, unproductive conflict styles. The first one is the bully. And we know what bullies are. It's a popular style. It's simple to be a bully. You just shout people down and you threaten. And as it says here, the bully's perspective is that might makes right. The sad truth is that bullies often get their way because they use power. They use their size. They use their language. They use their louder mouth. They can get bullied. But the problem is when you have a bully, they get their way, but it's not very good. They don't get very good productivity. They force it, and nothing really happens. The second style is the complainer. The complainer is the weak victim. They can't solve problems of others. They make it clear that they have their own problems and they're doing better than anyone else expects, and they hope that someone will rescue them by taking on the conflict. So you've all probably had complainers out in your schools, and all they do is they just, oh, I can't do that. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to whatever. They just complain. They say, I can't take it on. I just can't do it. Then there's the procrastinator. The procrastinator simply takes any problem or conflict that comes up, puts it on the back burner. Their motto is, let sleeping dogs lie. The problem is they only see they see only sleeping dogs. They don't see the potential behind people. They don't see a way to avoid a conflict. Guerrilla fighters are tough. They use sarcasm and they use criticism. They criticize the members of the conflict. They criticize the leader. They try to browbeat their enemies into feeling they were too stupid to even have raised an issue. They shoot from the trees and the bushes and they attack with no warning. Your guerrilla fighter as a conflict person is just going to attack you out of the clear blue. There are I've had some guerrilla fighters here in Lebanon that attack the city council just out of the clear blue. No matter what you say or what you do, they attack it. They insult others in public. They like to insult people. They're name callers, and they use various remarks like Mr. Negative will now speak, or how's that black cloud over your head? Not having a good day, are you? Watch out, you're about to agree with something. And they can make you feel, they try to make you feel smart, or they try to feel smart themselves if they can make you feel dumb. Frustrating style is the expert. The expert is often very bright and often very right. They refuse to ever be wrong. They will not admit that they were wrong. They're always right. And they believe whoever knows the most is the winner. Getting our ideas heard by them is almost impossible. Excuse me. Okay, in terms of conflict, the icicle is the most difficult style to manage. And icicles freeze up at the first sign of conflict. You know, they don't quite run away from it, but they freeze up. If you ask a person in a conflict what they think, they would probably say nothing. And if they're confronted about where do you stand on an issue, they'll usually reply, not sure yet, I don't know. If anything is wrong, they'll say, not now, everything's fine, just fine. The icicle believes that whoever is the quietest wins. If you say nothing, you cannot be attacked. So in terms of a conflict style, that's the complainer. Okay, here is the profile of a difficult person. They have a predictable, abrasive style of behavior. You can count on them. If you say the sun rises in the east, they'll say no, it raises in the west. If they complain on Monday and you miss it, don't worry, they'll do it again on Tuesday. Everybody finds it difficult, not just you. So the difficult person is universally seen as a difficult person. It isn't just you. They keep all the blame outside themselves. It is never their fault. I did this slide about 7 years ago, and I guess it applies now. They are certain to keep all blame outside themselves. It's never their fault. They rob you of time and energy. A minute with a difficult person is like an hour with anybody else. They're going to find every reason that the conflict is not their fault. They do not even have to be present to affect you. Somebody could just mention their name and you immediately become tense. I got to send this to my wife. I'm sorry. Their behavior is almost out of proportion to the problem, like Henny Penny. They get hit in the head with an acorn and they assume the sky is falling. They're terrible, terrible problem solvers. This has nothing to do with their intelligence, their skills, their abilities. Difficult people are very skilled and bright, but don't know how to work through differences with others. Difficult people are only difficult when they're not getting their way. If they got their way, they wouldn't be difficult. From their perspective, they know best and are blind to the positive possibilities and other options or the negative consequences of their plans. Okay, how do you work with a difficult person? Here's what you do. This is confrontational listening now. First of all, stand up. Don't ever, if a person is coming in to complain and be conflict oriented, don't sit behind your desk. Stand up. Use your desk as a barrier, but stand up. I worked for a principal one who was 6 foot. The principal was 6'8", and it was all in his torso. Sitting behind a desk, he looked like he was probably maybe 5'10", something like that, maybe 6. But when he unfolded his legs and stood up at 6'8", he towered over most people. I'll never forget the one day I was sitting in his office and this parent came in and was really upset about an issue and was complaining. And Keith unfolded himself from behind the desk. And that parent, the first thing Keith said is, "Sir, could you have a seat? Just have a seat." And the parent wouldn't sit down. So Keith unfolded from behind the seat. When he stood up, the parent sat down. So stand up. Talk straight. Don't talk jargon. Don't shout. Talk in your normal tone of voice. Just talk straight. Listen. Listen first. You let the other person do all the talking. You listen. Avoid triangles. If they say, Joe does it this way or does something, and I'm going, well, you say very simply, I'm sorry, but Joe isn't here. I'm interested in what your issue is. Joe has the same issue. Joe feels the same way I do. Fine, I understand Joe might, but Joe's not here. Can I listen to your side of the story right now? And avoid that triangle. Don't bring an unexpected third party into the discussion. Then you solve the problem. First thing you do is, these are the tools, solve the problem. Identify the emotional climate. How emotional is the person bringing the conflicts to you? If they're pretty straightforward, it'll be fairly easy. If they're shouting at you or they're yelling something, if they're yelling or shouting or raising their voice, in your straightforward language, say, excuse Mr. Smith, but I'm trying to listen to everything you're saying. Problem is I can't hear you when you're shouting, because all I hear is the shouting. I'm not hearing the word. Could you, just talk to me about it and try to calm it down. Listen and identify the problem. Stay focused on the problem. While you are listening to what the problem is, you should not be formulating a response. If you're formulating a response, you're not listening to the problem. And for you to come up with a response that will probably solve the conflict, you need to know what the problem is. So stay focused on the problem. Resist saying you did this or you did that or your son. Just stick to the problem. Don't place blame on anybody, and don't ever name call. Whether it's you or you're bringing in a third party yourself, which you should not do not do any name calling. To solve the problem, you develop alternatives. You listen to what the person has to say, and you develop alternatives. You evaluate the alternatives very quickly in your head. You pick one, and you be very clear about the process of the procedures you're going to use to resolve the problem. And then when you're finished, evaluate the success. Be sure to have a backup plan in case your plan doesn't work. Okay, confrontational listening. Here's how you do it. Person comes into your office, is really upset. Let me turn this off. Person comes into your office, is really upset and shouting. They don't have to be shouting, it can be loud. And you stand up and you say, well, what's the problem that we're trying to address? What are the issues? And you ask the person that, and you listen. You listen to everything they say, and you let them keep going as long as they want, as long as they're not shouting, as long as they're not using inappropriate language. You let them go as long as they want, and you listen. When they've burned out, and it could take 5 minutes, it could take longer. When they're burned out, then you say, now, Mr. Smith, I want to be sure I understand you completely. And I believe this is what you said. This is what you believe the issue is. And this is how you believe it happened. And this is, and so on. And you repeat back. And what you're trying to do is you say to Mr. Smith, am I correct? When you're finished, you say, Mr. Smith, am I correct? If Mr. Smith says no, you can say, oh, then what's not correct about it? And you let Mr. Smith talk again. And Mr. Smith can talk as long as he or she wants. And you listen to them, and then you repeat back. From what I gather, from what you told me, this is what I got wrong, and I want to make sure that we have everything right. And you give your side from what you've heard, and you say, is this correct? As soon as he say, yes, that's correct, and you can say, then here's my solution. And you tell them what your solution is. If they don't agree with your solution, then you can say why, and they come back. Now, Here's what will happen. Quite often, as soon as you start talking and you're saying to them, this is what I heard you say. And as soon as you make a slight mistake, or you go off, or you use a wrong word, or they think that you're not listening to them, they will interrupt you. What you have to do is you have to be strong enough to say, excuse me, Mr. Smith, I let you talk for as long as you needed to, and I did not interrupt you. I would like that same courtesy. And you do it just like that in nice, calm language. I would like that same courtesy. Most of the time, they'll stop and let you talk. If they insist upon interrupting, then that opens the door for you to say, Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, but it appears that this issue is very, very emotional for you, and you feel very strongly about it. However, as long as you keep interrupting me or you're getting loud, we're not going to have a productive conversation at all. Why don't we make an appointment and come back, and I'll talk to you tomorrow? And you do anything you can to calm the situation. Ideally, which is it's never ideal, the person talks to you, you tell them what you heard, and then you tell them what you're going to do, and they agree with you. Because it's usually something that you can solve. If you can't solve it, you can say, I'm sorry, but I don't have a solution to this. I've got to bring somebody else in on it, and I'm going to talk to so-and-so and tell them what you're going to do. I'm going to talk to the teacher. I'm going to get the information from the teacher, and then I'll call you up after I've talked to the teacher, and I'll explain to you what happened from the teacher's viewpoint, and then we'll work out a solution. You want to bring that confrontation down. Don't ever call anybody names. Don't raise your voice. Don't ever raise your voice when you're in confrontational listening. And the most difficult thing to do is listen. And also, do not sit there and write down notes while that person is talking. Because if you're writing down notes, you're not listening. You've got to do this all in your head. You have to practice it. And you'll have distractions around you, which is why I enjoy doing this in class with the distractions. But that's how that's confrontational listening in a nutshell. And it takes practice. I've had parents come in. I'll never forget the time that I had a parent who got upset with me because his son doesn't use that kind of language. And I said, I'm sorry, sir, but the teacher wrote down exactly what your son said. And that was the language he used. And he got he said, all been honest. He said, he doesn't use that language and I don't like it. And you can't tell me that he uses that language. I'm going to come down there and hit you in the face right now. And I believed the guy. So one of my local police officers walked in the front door of the school, our school resource officer. And I told him, I said, I think I have Mr. So-and-so coming down here to beat me in the face. And he said, oh, okay, I'll sit down for a minute over here. So all 6'4" of him sat down in the corner waiting. And sure enough, that parent came in the door and he looks at the secretary, he goes, where's Farrell? And the officer stands up and says, oh, Mr. Farrell is right over here. And the guy calmed down real fast because there's no way he was going to continue that confrontation. Police officers will tell you that there are certain ways they resolve confrontation. The first one is the police car with its siren and its lights and all that. When a police car pulls up in front of a house, that sign kind of is a symbol of something's going on. There's authority here. Police officer gets out of the car. Police officer is wearing a uniform and has a firearm usually, but is wearing a uniform. And that's another symbol of authority. So that's how police officers try to maintain the quiet and confrontation. And they do the same thing. I went through a confrontation with a parent who was calling me all kinds of things because there were four or five police cars out in front of the school, and the school dance was letting out, and all these police officers down here, and she was 3 sheets to the wind, and she came up to me and started shouting at me about how the kids can't have fun because we have this police around here all the time, and they can't do this, and she's shouting at me. And the sergeant was standing right next to me, and I looked at her. I said, "Ma'am," I said, "do you realize that you're committing a class 4 misdemeanor by shouting at me? I wish you would stop shouting at me." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Well, ma'am," I said, "first of all, yeah, I believe that you are not, that you're intoxicated. I can't tell you that you are. I believe you are because of the way you're acting and the way you're shouting. You cannot be on school grounds. Please leave the school grounds." And then she went on for another 2 minutes, and the sergeant standing next to me said to the lady, "He's right. If you say one more word, I'm going to put handcuffs on you and arrest you for trespassing because he has the authority to tell you to leave the school grounds." And she got quiet very quickly. I'm not afraid to get into a conflict if I have to, but I never shout. I never raise my voice. I never call anybody names. And I always use the law to back me up. So are there any questions about confrontational listening? Have any of you had a situation where you wish you could have done something differently?
Something that I learned whenever I was at Smithton from our superintendent there, who I absolutely loved, she shared with us, she called it calm listening. And so like C stood for compliment. A was ask. So you ask a question, you listen, and then you mimic and repeat, and then you can work on resolving the situation. So by even just working at pathways with like my behavior kiddos, I always keep that in the back of my mind, just like remembering that if I'm calm and I go through those stages, then I'm respectfully listening to somebody else. And sometimes just the fact that you're letting their voice be heard is enough to solve the situation.
Oh, that's right. That's the Ben Bissell model. And you'll often find out if you let that parent or whoever's in the conflict just wear themselves out talking at you, as long as you're listening and you can summarize it back and you let them talk themselves out, sometimes that alone resolves the situation. You'd be surprised.
Dr. Farrell, I got a question.
Sure, Jacob.
In a situation, I'm sure you've probably been in it, but in a situation where you have a confrontational parent that comes in, you go through the stages that you talked about listening to them and then reverting back to them what you think they said. If it gets to the point where they're continuing to interrupt and they're continuing to be confrontational, have you found that it is actually effective when you say, "Hey, let's reschedule and come back tomorrow"? I mean, at that point, are they willing to kind of just stop and leave?
Sometimes they're not. I've never had to do it, but in my training, I was prepared to have somebody removed if we needed to have it done. But most of the time, you give them the chance to talk it out and talk it out and talk it out.
Sure.
As long as they're not raising their voice, they're not using language towards you, there's no reason. It will normally work, and you can get them to calm it down enough to leave. You can say, "Leave." And one of the nice things about standing up is when you're standing up in a conflict and the person's not leaving, start walking towards the door. They'll follow you.
Sure.
They'll follow you out of the room.
Yeah.
In fact, I recommend whenever a teacher is setting up their classroom that they actually not put their desk far away from the door. They try to keep their workstation, the teacher's workstation, close to the door, because if you have a confrontational parent come into your classroom and they're expecting to see you and you're at your desk far away from the door, it's a little more difficult to get them out of the classroom. If you're close to the door, you can kind of walk them out. If you have to go through that whole classroom, that's a whole long distance to walk, probably getting around desks and chairs and other things. So that's one reason why I recommend in my classroom management materials that a classroom setup the teacher's workstation or desk should be closer to the door than not. Go ahead, Aaron.
How do you feel about like a witness or someone else to be somewhat present? I mean, obviously if you got a parent coming in to discuss a serious issue, something that you know it's going to be heated, and they come in to, let's just say, your office, you obviously want the door open, someone at least to be near. in case of worst case scenario happening?
Sure. I usually
He
let
lies about something?
Yeah, I keep the door open. If they start, one of the reasons why you don't want them shouting is because if they're shouting and the door is open, everybody's hearing it. But even through a closed door, my secretary one time called the sheriff's department when a parent came in. I probably told you this story. One of my classes slammed the lock on the desk and was shouting. I just looked out at the secretary, and she immediately, I saw her pick up the phone. I knew what she was doing. She was calling the police. And that's where you'll want your secretary or your school resource officer, if somebody's nearby, if you're anticipating. I never really anticipate a conflict that goes that far unless it's an issue where, somebody, an example was the time I had 3 Mormon sisters and they were caught with liquor, with alcohol in the car on school grounds. And that was totally against the religion and so on. And the parent was really very accusatory. And we actually had the girls arrested by the police department because they were there. The police actually found the car, found the girls in the car, contacted me. They had already arrested them for minor consumption. And the parent came in the next day and was not happy.
I've seen the 24-hour, like, come back 24 hours later, that rule play out quite a few times.
Yeah,
but
that's
at Pathways, a lot of times the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So
no, it doesn't. That's an axiom that I was taught one of my earliest leadership courses in the 1980s. But that was we called them laxioms because it was Paul Lansing's axioms, so we called them laxioms. But one of them was in times of conflict, give it 24 hours. So if you have a conflict, if you give it 24 hours, if you can, you're not really putting it off. But if you can, you're not being a procrastinator, but sometimes 24 hours will resolve a situation. And if you can put it off, it works. And you're right, Aaron, you probably got that in your training too.
sometimes it's not always just good for the parents or the individuals, but also for the teachers, for the leader.
It is. I know. I've had student conflicts, teacher-student conflicts, and the teacher comes in, wants me to do something right now, and I'll say, okay, and I have the student sit down, send the teacher back to the room. Student sits there for about a half an hour, and then I talk to the student calmly, find out what it was. The next day, go back to the teacher, and it's all resolved. Sometimes it's easy. Anybody else? Okay, let me move on to the servant leadership. This is another leadership model, and it's a model that I think I practice this too. When you're a leader, you don't use just one model. You use a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You make it your leadership style. And so I'm trying to give you as many tools as possible. And this is the last tool you're going to get you in this course. Confrontational meeting from air to servant leadership. Okay, servant leadership. And this is a workshop I've done for principals. But leadership is the ability to get your team moving in the same direction. Again, this is all part of that change process. You want your team to go in the same direction. If the leader is out in front on his own or her own, just heading out there without the team behind them, without them carrying the leader, because the team actually carries the leader. The leader doesn't carry the team carries the leader. Okay, and then you have to remember that sometimes we have to deal with courage under fire. And this was from Wallace in Scotland. I wanted to run, but I knew I was needed to stay to do the right thing. And you see all the dogs and that poor cat.
Dr. Farrow, for some
Yeah.
reason the slides aren't moving for us.
They are not coming forward?
We can see the main page where it's servant leadership for principals, but it wasn't like transitioning slide to slide.
Let me do it a different way here. Let me call it up. And I'll call it up. Yeah, thanks for letting me know, because I can only assume I'm moving forward. So let me open this up. I see what happened. It's in a protected view. I've got to get out of here completely and get it out of protected view. Hang on just a second. Wrong one. Servant leadership. Let me take it out of protected view. Now I should be able to get it going for you. Oh, the confrontational leadership one worked. I wonder why that one didn't. Okay, servant leadership. Let's try this one. It is not letting me open it up. Let me exit it completely and open it up again. I have to exit the share, exit that, go back out here and reopen this PowerPoint slideshow. All right. Let me start sharing. Okay, I should be able to run it now. It looks different. Is it working now?
Yes.
Okay, this is the one where I was talking about. The leader brings the team along, and the team holds up the leader. The leader doesn't hold the team holds the leader, and you got to move forward. Then courage under fire. This now makes more sense to you. I wanted to run, but I knew I was needed to stay to do the right thing. Wallace. As you can see, that poor little cat wants to stay and do the right thing. Servant leadership. It is an understanding and practice leadership that places the good of those. In other words, you're going to put the good of those being led over your self-interest. Who is more important are those who are being led, not the leader. It emphasizes service to others. It's a holistic approach to work. It's almost a religion. It's a sense of community. It's a shared decision-making. Spirituality in the workplace. It's a whole way of doing things. It isn't just the leader. It is a culture. When you have servant leadership operating in the school has that culture. Servant leaders create trusting working environments. You have to appreciate the people working with you. You listen to and encourage followers. You actually want your followers to become leaders, so you really encourage them. You model the behavior that you want your teachers to model. So if you want your teachers to be effective teachers, then you have to be an effective principal and model what they're supposed to do. They have a high degree of credibility. They're honest, they have a high degree of integrity, and they're competent. And honesty is very important. If you ever break the trust that comes with honesty, you'll never have your teachers follow you again. You need to have a clear vision yourself. If you don't have a clear vision yourself, how are you going to get how are you going to lead your servants to come with you? They don't serve you. The servant leader serves the followers by making sure they know where they're going and what they're doing. You are a conscientious steward of resources. In other words, the servant leader knows where the resources are, and you help the teachers find the resources they need to accomplish what they are supposed to do best, which is teach. You have good communication with your followers. you're ethical, and you use ethical persuasion. You don't threaten, you don't bully, and you invite everybody to participate in carrying out the vision. You empower people by encouraging them or enabling them to perform at their best, and you're not afraid to delegate. Now we're getting a little bit of Hershey Blanchard in there. So you direct them, you coach them, you give them some freedom, and then you delegate. Overall, you provide guidance and direction because you assume the role of the attendant to humanity. This is from Russell. If you love kids and are good with people, the rest is going to fall into place. You think of the leaders that you've worked for, some of you in your short careers, some of you in your longer careers, that had a lot of success. And you will find that they usually put people first. It wasn't them. It wasn't me. It's you. You are going to see success. And so you put the people first. A mature leader will automatically be engaged in empowering and equipping the resources and energy. You empower people. You don't give them, you don't delegate to them without the empowerment to do what they have to do. Okay, servant leaders, they listen and they have foresight. They listen to others. They don't talk about themselves. They don't begin taking notes. They listen. Remember Ben Bissell? Servant leaders call on each team member in an organization to think about the ethics and values. So everybody is involved in what the ethics and values are of the organization. You are aware, if you live by your values and your principles, your staff will follow you because they'll respect you and then they'll do whatever's the best for the school. You know, there's a culture. I said there's a culture. I can tell when I walk into a place if I'm among friends or strangers. I was back in 1982. I was interviewed by 2 school districts in Phoenix. I walked into one building and it was like I wasn't welcome in that building. It wasn't clean. The office, the secretaries had stuff piled on their desks. There were no pictures, photos on the wall. There were just the standard certificates, no flowers on the desk. You walked in and the one secretary looked up at me and says, "Yeah, can I help you?" And I gave her my name. So told her I was there for an interview and she said, "Okay, sit down." That was it. They weren't really friends. I go to the other school and the secretary's friendly. And she said, "Hey, welcome, Mr. Farrell. Would you like a cup of coffee or a soda?" And she just went on and I sat down and then the principal came out and he apologized immediately for being a minute late, just a minute. And he invited me in. He says, "I didn't get a drink the first time." He said, "Would you like a soda or a glass of water, or a bottle of water?" I told him I was okay. I didn't need it. But I knew immediately that was a friendly place. There are flowers on the counter, flowers on the secretary's desk. The principal office was very neat. The secretary's desks were neat. Everything was in its place. Is servant leadership, I'm reading this, is about being a shepherd, not a gatekeeper. You're not a gatekeeper. Shepherds lead people along. That's stewardship. Empathy. Your team needs to get to know you. Your team needs you to get to know them. You have to know who's on your team. You have to know your people. You're going to need to laugh at them. If there's a tragedy and family member has an accident or there's a death in the family for one of you, then you got to be willing to cry with them and care when they have a loss. This is part of being a servant, to really like your people. You get to know them, you really like them, and it's true altruistic, it's true friendship with them. You're still the leader, but you can still be a friend. Okay, servant leaders persuade, they sustain spirit over their own ego, they have foresight over control. They don't control people, they have foresight. They get to know them. They know what their skills are. Remember Hershey Blanchard? You get to know your skills, that's situational. If you identify the skills, they're able to move them through the quadrants. You listen. We keep getting back to that listening. Adam, that part in your coaching thing where they said they taught listening, that's so important. You have to listen. And healing over judgment. If somebody does something wrong, don't judge them and say, oh, you were wrong. You help them, teach them, let that become a teachable moment so that they learn not to do that again. And the institution, if your institution is a servant institution, we honor questions and criticism. Criticism, by the way, is going to be usually constructive criticism. It's not going to be nasty criticism. We're going to acknowledge and tend to the corrupting influences of power. So we don't like power. We acknowledge that it's out there and we avoid using it. And we avoid doing anything with it, as a matter of fact. But you make explicit that we want everybody to serve. McKendree University, for example, an important quality of all of the faculty and all of the students is that we are servants. We are all involved in service to the university, service to the department, service to the students, service to higher education in general, and service to the community. That's our mantra. We believe in service, and we serve. You can almost put that little logo from the LAPD on our doors. We serve. Makes explicit its aspiration to serve, and we monitor the accomplishment attitudes of those who are served. We balance the stability of the administration with the creativity of leadership. We build trust. This is the bottom line. We build trust by performance, and in the process reject both blind trust and trust based on charisma. Just because you're a nice guy doesn't mean you're a servant leader. This is the traditional school pyramid on leadership. The principal has an administrative team. Administrative team then works with the teachers, support staff. The principal is at the pinnacle. In servant leadership, the principal is at the bottom. The principal is serving the administrative team and the teaching and support staff. The best leaders are so little about themselves and so much about their people, one does not even know they are in the building. We had a program called the Missouri Leadership Academy, and we had 5 academies across the state, and I was the facilitator for one of the academies. And when I went out to recruit, because we recruited teachers, school administrators, building administrators, principals, assistant principals, superintendents, board members. We've got all levels of the school culture involved. And the Leadership Academy was a commitment of 2 days a week for 11 months. And or 2 days a month, excuse me, for 11 months. And we started off with a big event that was a statewide event, and then we had the individual academies. Then we would have a second statewide event in the fall, and a third statewide event in the spring at the end of the program. And we had activities through all these events. And one of the biggest concerns I got from people, particularly building principals, assistant principals, is I can't afford to be out of the school 2 days a month. I can't afford it. And my response to them is, you can't afford not to be out of the school building 2 days a month, because this is your chance to know that the building can function without you. Because if the building can function without you being in the building, you are doing your job. And the purpose for the academy was to make sure you knew you got all the tools you needed to do your job. And at the end of the year, they would come back and they say, you know, I was gone those 2 days every month and they never missed me. Never even missed me. And that's what a leader is. A leader can do that, then you know what you're doing. Application of this, you come to an agreement on vision and mission, make sure the core values are aligned with that. Every 3 months, review and refine your plan to reach your goals. Live the vision, mission, and core values. If the principal does not, and the school does not live the vision, the mission, and the core values, then the school is not going to be able to function. Schools without well-planned, articulated vision, without a process in place to follow through and implement it, are in real trouble. That vision isn't just a bunch of words we put out there, and that vision isn't a term we teach you that's just vision. That vision should be an operational vision. It's really working. I should be able to walk into your school and, based upon the way the kids walk down the hallway, know what your vision and mission is. A lot of schools have it painted on the wall just inside the front door. Okay, when you have to talk out issues, follow 3 rules. Number 1, be honest. Number 2, do it with lots of grace, be gentle. And number 3, what's that word? Listen again. Listen so you can understand the other person. But that's when you have issues. That's what you have to do. Here we go. This is important. This is probably the most important advice I'm going to give you. Don't take your work home with you. If you take your work home with you, then you cannot separate your work from your personal life. As a principal, as a teacher, as an administrator, you have to be able to respect your personal life. Don't take your work home. This is kind of rough to do right now. We're all taking our work home. And then put your health above everybody else. If you've got a cold, don't force yourself to go to work. Take care of yourself, because if you don't, your health could get worse, and you're not going to be of any value to yourself or the school or your family. Be sure you're taking care of your mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. If you need to get away, get away. Sometimes you might just have to leave the school in the middle of the day because something's going on, and as long as things are sort of under control and you've got to get away, you might have to do that. Now, hopefully, your superintendent understands what servant leadership is and that you need to do it. Rest, renew, spend time with your family, take time away from the office. Exercise. You've got to exercise. You've got to eat healthy. One of the biggest mistakes I made as a school administrator is I would go in, sit down, I'd be finished at lunch in 5 minutes. And I learned that wasn't a good thing to do. I was putting on weight, I was getting irritable. So I would go in and I had 20 minutes or 30 minutes for lunch. I would sit down and relax and have lunch, talk to the teachers in the room, or if there's another principal, another administrator, talk to that person. In higher ed, we had a table for the faculty, and we would go sit down at that table and we would just have lunch, and we talk about everything but what we're doing at the university. That's the way you got to do. Practice what you preach. And don't obsess about work issues at home. You're not going to be able to solve it. It's just going to tear you apart. Worry about work at work. Don't worry about work at home. To obsess over somebody being upset at you, or a kid yelling or something, that's not healthy. It doesn't help you out. The first thing you want to do when you get your first teaching job is go to every teacher in your school and every member of the staff of your school, sit down and spend 15, 20 minutes with them and find out who they are, what they do, what they like. Just have a nice little conversation and talk to every one of them one-on-one and listen. Listen to what they have to say. You'll find the right questions to ask, but don't do it as an appointment that they have to come to the office. If they have to come to the office, they have to come to the office. I'm in trouble. What did I do wrong? They're going to start obsessing. What you do is you go to their workplace, you sit down and you talk to them in their workplace. And you engage, you ask each person where they are, what they want to be, where do they want to go, how do they want to do, what improvements are they looking for in themselves? Ask them. You may find that you may have a staff member or a faculty member who isn't in the right place within the school. Maybe they could be plugged into another job, another assignment, another grade level, and then that gets you the opportunity to find out where they work best to benefit the school, and then you can assign them where you need them the most. I had every month I met with my staff. Even at McHenry, every month I had an elementary coordinator, a secondary coordinator, I had the field experience coordinator, and we had the faculty secretary. And every month we would sit down together and we would meet and we'd compare our calendars, look at what we're doing, talk about issues, and so on. So we met them. Never ever rush anyone out of your office. If you have to leave and you have to go somewhere, and somebody comes in and they say to you, do you have a minute? If you don't have a minute, be very frank. Say, I'm sorry, I don't have a minute right now. I have to do this, this, and this. Can we get together and give them a specific time at this time later today? That's the only way you can rush somebody out of your office without them feeling badly. Because if you truly have something to do and someplace to go, that's important. Sometimes you just can't let other people control your schedule. Keep your office organized and presentable, and always be nice to people. You know, when people come into my office, I always stand up. When I know there wasn't a conflict coming, I would stand up and go around my desk. Then I started organizing my room so that my desk was perpendicular to the door. And then there was a chair next to the desk. And if somebody came in, I could turn and look at the door and see them, and then I would stand up. And then if I had to, I could gradually walk them out of the room. If they wanted to talk to me, they'd come in and sit down. That seat was there for them to come in and sit down and be able to talk to me without having to make an appointment. School is a business about business. School business is a people business. That's your raw material in the school is people. You are the leader. You are in the business of bridge building, not bridge burning. You want to get people to work together. The joy of work is not getting away from the people, but being out with them. The best thing I ever did was to get out, and every week I would take a cart of orange juice and cups to a classroom, and I'd go into that classroom, sit down with the students. We sit there, have cookies and orange juice, and talk. Every week I would pick one classroom, so that through the course of the school year I got all the classrooms in. I would do that sometimes. In higher ed, I never did that, but in the elementary and secondary school, I did. But I enjoyed being with the people, getting out of the school. My wife, when she was a principal, was never found in her office during the school day. During the school day, she was always out in the school, in the classroom, working with the teachers and the students. She was sometimes like a second teacher in the classroom. And it's because of that the people really followed her. The board didn't like her, but her teachers and the students and the parents adored her. Okay, then one of the things you have to do is delegate. Once a month, we already talked about that. Oops. There you go. During school hours, remain focused on the school. Know what is happening. The only way you can do that is to be out in the school. We call it management by walking around. I call it leadership by walking around. LBWA. And between, I have teachers, when I knew the bell was ringing at the high school, but just before the bell would ring, I'd go out in the hallway, stand out in the hallway outside the office. And the teachers said, oh, I'm always in the hallway. They always know you're around. They know where to find you. And that's support from the school. It helps keep discipline down, other issues. Conduct a mid-year survey. Ask the teacher. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback from your teachers. And then if you hold your teachers to a high standard, whatever standard you hold them to, that's the standard they're going to achieve. If you have weak teachers that aren't getting there, those are the ones you have to work with. But when a teacher is unfit for the classroom, you've got to be willing to say, you got to go and get rid of that teacher. But if you put a standard out there, your teachers will work to achieve it. Find ways to show appreciation to your volunteers. Don't forget, you got parents, you've got people who come to the school and do things for you. And they would come into the classroom and help the teachers. Show appreciation to them. Give them a little token of gratitude. Recognize them in a newsletter. Recognize them in an announcement. Go out, and then the students, go out with them at recess. Don't be afraid to play games with them. When hiring, always go after your best teachers, and make sure your teachers have a mentor the first day they walk into the school when you've hired a new teacher. And get one for yourself. You're a principal. Find another school administrator in your district or in your building, or another building in the district, another school district, to serve as a mentor, and let them let them guide you. You'll recognize the kind of person you want. Always make your staff meetings meaningful. Your staff meeting or your teachers' meetings, if it could be an announcement, then put it in writing and send it to the teachers as an announcement. The meeting should be discussion of issues, discussion of how to improve the school, discussion of projects. It is not a place to read announcements. Make announcements, just that, an announcement, and give it to the teachers. So you want your teachers to learn too. You empower and equip every staff member to do what they are trained to do. Let them do their job. Hold them accountable. It's not about you. It's about your teachers and your students. You must be the support network for your teachers. Finally, stand up for what is right and have the courage to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves. That's the essence of leading as a servant leader. For example, one of my mentors was the president of a small college, and there was a sit-in at the college. The faculty were all up in arms, and they didn't like the fact they weren't getting a raise, so they came in and they did a sit-in in the president's office. And the president said, well, he was asked by his provost, well, what should we do? And the president, he said, just let them sit here. They'll eventually get tired and leave. Let them sit here. That was Paul Lansing, by the way, who had the Laxiums. And the only time he got a little upset was when the union representative, they had an outside union representative, came in and berated a secretary. And he stood up and he said, I'm sorry, but you can come in here and you can sit in and you can berate me. You can tell me what I'm not doing, but you don't ever tell one of my staff members that what they're doing. You don't have the right to do that, nor do I. So basically, when that happened, the faculty kind of settled down and they realized that Paul was really on their side. It's just that he had to maintain what the Board of Trustees. So in a nutshell, advocate for your people. That's what's important. You advocate for them, they will follow you anywhere. And those are my primary references for this. Any questions or comments? I know that was a lot of information. I hope my mic was on the whole time. Yeah, it was. Go ahead, Michael. You're not on.
No, I was just giving a thumbs up. So much of what was in that, I can see every day where we work.
Yeah.
With the administrators that we have, the support is there, and following all those guidelines, you can see daily where we work.
Yeah, that's important. And you can see it, and you feel good working there. And if they ask you to do something, you just say, how high? Anybody else? I hope you all remember these theories that I've given you and these leadership bits and pieces. I can't test you on it. I'm not going to test you on it because there's no way. The test is going to happen when you get your first leadership role and you're in charge. Just remember these notes. don't be afraid to download the PowerPoint and hang on to it as something that you could use in the future. You can always refer to it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I will put this video out probably tomorrow morning, and so that you haven't had a chance, if you want to go back over this and review the servant leadership. The other one, the listening, is part of the servant leadership. You have to listen. And remember, when I talked about the change game, what was the big thing there? If you were going to, in the change game and this concern-based adoption model, that levels of use and stages of concern, getting change through is a lot of listening. If you don't talk and listen, nothing's going to happen. All right. Anything else for the good? Annie, you got your mic turned on. You were saying something?
Yes. Is there a place where we can locate the PowerPoints, or do you just suggest that we get them from your videos that you've uploaded?
The PowerPoint should be in, the PowerPoint themselves should be in Blackboard. In fact, I know the last one I just did is in Blackboard.
Okay, thank you.
But most of them are in Blackboard. I'm not sure the Ben Bissell one is in Blackboard. Let me take a quick look out here. I can tell you very quickly. The theories of delegation is in there. That's the Hersey Blanchard model. Servant leadership is out there. Plus, there is another document that are servant leadership characteristics. The confrontational listening is out there. Myers-Briggs stuff is out there. The CBAM change game stuff is out there. Forest field analysis is out there. 21 area field. They are all out there. Plus, there's one that I didn't talk about on professional learning communities. There are 2 documents on professional learning communities, and the role. One of them is the role of leadership in professional learning communities. Those are in Blackboard. If there is anything that you want that is not in Blackboard, just let me know, and I'll get it to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else? Well,
I had another
Okay.
quick question, but it's not applicable to everyone. So if you have a moment afterwards, can I ask?
Oh, wait. Aaron, you were coming up on something?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I thought I saw your mic turn on. I can see it when your mic turns on. You pop to the top of the list.
I have a question too, but I'm not sure if it's applicable to everybody.
Okay, we'll talk afterwards. Anyway, I wish you all a very fruitful career, and I hope that you have an enjoyable summer as much as you can, and that as you go through your internship next year, you learn a lot, because you will learn more during your internship than any of our classes will give you. And your first year in a leadership role is 100% learning experience. We can't teach you everything. We can't put it in your brains, but you have to have the understanding of the basic principles of what leadership is. And leadership is not telling, leadership is listening. Okay, well, for most of you, I'll see you probably on Monday.
Happy Teacher Appreciation Day to everyone, or
Oh,
week
thank you.
for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farrell. We'll see you Monday.
I'll see you Monday, Aaron.
Appreciate it. We'll see you.
All right. Okay, we're down to Annie and Tyler. All right. Go ahead, Annie.
Okay. First, I just wanted to ask if you will be posting this recording. I wanted to apologize. I sent you an email. I have never been late to a class in my life. I did sign on a little bit late and missed part of Adam. I saw all of your PowerPoints and heard all of that. I missed a little bit of Adam's presentation because there was construction. I'm at my parents' house.
You also missed Christy's presentation. So
is that something I can go back and watch?
Oh yeah, you can watch. I started the recording late too, so you're missing a few minutes at the beginning of the recording. but
Okay.
because I hit the button late. But you're good. Let me turn the recording off now because I don't need to record my discussion.